Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Travis Chance, a prolific game designer working with indie boards and cards. His newest title, Journeys Afar, the Ketsueki, is currently on Kickstarter. Travis, welcome to the binge. How you doing, my friend?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Man, I am so excited about this episode. You have such a broad experience base in this industry, and just reading through your bio, I'm like, holy cow, this guy has done some stuff, eh?
Thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, I've been around for a while. I'm kind of what I guess you could say I'm a comedian's comedian. I've been lurking in the background of the industry, doing lots of stuff for over a decade. But yeah, lots of different hats I've wore, including this one. So
Where did it all start? Like, what was the first kind of intro to the industry for you? Like the very, very first game, and was it a game you started off with? Was it working with other game collaborators? Like, where did you kind of start? What was that kind of first foot in?
well, I have ADHD and I am a tangential thinker. So let me try truncate this unnecessarily long tale. I always liked games. I've always liked nerdy stuff. I grew up like very religious and I like hid a copy of Hero Quest under my bed and like D&D and D and the Lord of the Rings books like they were, like, I don't know, like contraband or whatever. And my grandmother, who I'm very close with, we always would play games, but we would play like Scrabble and War and Wizard and things like that. And I got into Magic when I was in high school, and I used to do things like buy role-playing game books and read them like books. So I've always just kind of had this interest in games. And then the other half of my life was I was a musician. So I was a professional drummer until I was
Hmm.
32. I lived in New York City. I played for the majors. So I was kind of like this, drummer by night, nerd by day kind of guy. And I, my partner at the time in New York was like, we ought to play games. And I reached out to my friend Nick, who would later, we would start Action Phase Games together. And he mentioned to me some games that he really liked. And he mentioned Dominion. And at that point, I was still just kind of, thinking about traditional board games, maybe like Catan type stuff.
Hmm.
And Dominion really, I think within 3 months, I had 100 games. And then my partner was like, no, I meant like Scrabble, not whatever this is. And then on my 32nd birthday, I had a few drinks and I watched the movie Total Recall and I was like, man, why isn't there a game for this? And then I woke up the next day and I just kind of, I don't know, like wished this game, that my very first game, into the universe, willed it into the universe. And a few months later, it got signed and I didn't know it at the time, but I had all the art commissioned. I had all the graphics done. All they had to do was format a rule book and make a box, and like the game was a done deal. And that I've worked on. I don't know. I think I have. At one point, I was in the top 50 Kickstarter campaign people. I don't think that's true anymore, but that's my only campaign that failed, was my very first game. And then
Oh, really?
that kind of spurned me on to, I was like, I think I can do better. And then my buddy who got me addicted to Dominion, now that I think about it, I should blame him for the path my life has taken. He was like, why don't we just do our own thing? And so I moved back from New York City to Indiana and we started Action Phase Games and we launched a game called Heroes Wanted. And back in the Stone Age of 2014, it made 140 something thousand dollars, which back then was like,
Huge. Yep.
it wasn't like the economy was that drastically different, but the expectation on Kickstarter was very different.
Hmm.
And we started a company. We made 8 games, the last of which was Aeon's End. And then, we sold to indie boards and cards, and I've just kind of been doing it ever since. So I started off as a game designer, but with kind of like art director, production kind of without realizing that that's what I was doing. And then as we kind of figured out within our first company and the later ones that I worked at, what I was kind of better at doing, like, developer, I've done far more art direction and development than I have actual game design, but I've designed a lot of games too. Yeah. Sorry, I think I'm probably jumping in
No,
front of
that's great. So the
questions.
first the first game, the total so it didn't fund on Kickstarter. Then you put it on Kickstarter, and
Came out. It didn't fund. It came out to very lukewarm reception. It very The game was infamy. I was going to say it very famously, but I was doing a pun without realizing it. The first player marker was like this kind of Blade Runner pistol token.
yeah,
And the game, I just got the rights back from the game like about a year ago, and I think it actually holds up. It's auction, and I think auction is a tough mechanism. It's like drafts.
polarizing. Yeah.
Auctions are like an unfun version of drafting. They're kind of punishing the new players. So, but yeah, that was my first foray, and I just ever since then I really love making games. They're just kind of they're like every game I make is like a love letter to an interest or an inspiration, and uh, I'm very heavily emotionally and creatively invested in every project I do. And it's always like, so I'm wrapping up the one my game that you just mentioned at the
Yeah.
beginning. And it's like going through a breakup almost. Like I go through withdrawal. I'm not like talking about it every day. I'm not working on it every day. And I've got to start gearing up for the next thing. So
Yeah, I think a lot of people kind of skip over that, right? The emotional toll that game design, Kickstarter can take, right? Like it's a very vulnerable position you're putting yourself in because you're creating something and then you're putting it for people to opine on, right? And I mean it you get like people's worst fears. They see Dice Tower go and review their game
yeah.
unsolicited and absolutely trash it, and it's like, oh god,
I've had, yeah, one of my last 5 years because of COVID and like some infrastructural stuff at the last company I worked at. I have not had I've had one game come out and it got a 5 on Dice Tower. It was like the lowest rated thing I've ever had come out. And it's funny, I was texting Tom this morning.
yeah,
He's a buddy, and we were talking about the new Magical Athlete. I asked him if he liked it. Because I thought it was really cool, the presentation and the price point and everything. It's
yeah,
a really impressive product, and it's heartbreaking, yeah. But this is the primary. Like you got to have thick skin, you know.
yeah,
I mean, I work on a game for a year and a half, and then someone plays it wrong one time on they go on BGG and write a dissertation on why the game sucks, is broken, things are overpowered, and you just have to sit back and go, okay, thanks for playing. Like,
yeah.
it's the price you pay to make art and put it into the public. So
I've had that happen with a reviewer once, a couple reviewers on one of my games leading into my campaign. They read the rules wrong and they didn't play it correctly, and then they trashed it based on their interpretation of how they were playing the game versus the actual way to play the game. I'm like, oh my god, all those things that they're talking about is 100% due to them playing the game the wrong way. But
I mean, it
yeah,
happens. It happens even before people play the game. Someone will see something and they'll be like, "This card is broken," and it's like the amount of times that a game comes out that's actually broken is like less than 1%.
yeah,
Like it just doesn't. Even like people will use like the Few Acres of Snow, the Martin Wallace game, and that's not really the game's not broken. That's a result of people having the game and loving it and playing it so many times that they discover an emergent strategy that is exploitable to 99% of humans that don't play that game 100 times.
yeah,
They would never know that the Halifax hammer is this dominant, crazy strategy within the game. So I mean, it's one of those things. People are entitled to their opinion. And again, like if it wasn't for the consumers, these people that were buying and playing the games, I wouldn't have a job. We
yeah,
wouldn't be sitting here talking right now. So
absolutely.
it is the price you pay. And I also was a musician, so my whole life, all I've done is make stuff and have people criticize it. So great, it's a wonderful feeling.
Where did Colossal come into play? So you started, like, again, you didn't just start one company, you've started multiple, right? So Colossal Games, was that after you sold to Indie Boards and Cards?
Yeah, so we sold to Indie Boards and Cards, and after my initial minimum contract was up.
Yep.
I left and I started a new company with one of the guys, Arno, who owns Matago,
Hmm.
and some investors that were gamers. And yeah, I mean, it was just one of those things where I made a phone call. I called two people. I called Arno and I called Zev from Z-Man Games. And then Arno said, I'll call you back in 20 minutes. And then I had a first class ticket to San Francisco. And then I had seed capital for a company. And the first thing I looked at was a game that had been sitting in Matago's hopper for a long time, called Western Legends. I think it was called Western Legends. Maybe I can't remember if that was the name or we named it that. But it was just this kind of sketch of an idea that was cool. And I saw the potential. I think that's like really one of my skills, not to toot my own horn, is like I can kind of look at the real primordial ooze of a game and I can
Yeah.
imagine where it could go.
Yeah.
And I mean the first version of this, and this is no smack talk to Hervé, the primary designer on the game. It was just it was his first game, and it was a love letter to his to westerns, and there was a lot of stuff that needed to be kind of moved around to capture some of the concepts and ideas that he had, but there was a strong foundation there to work with. And Western Legends just was a home run out of the ballpark. It made did very well. It went on into retail to do very well. It made tons of people's, it was like a beloved Western game. It ended up being on South Park. I ended up getting flown out to hang out with the South Park creators for a week.
That's cool.
Yeah, because of that game. It was wild. Gen Con, I ended up meeting Trey Parker, who was just unbelievably cool. I mean, it's like the coolest nerd experience of my life was like the whole South Park thing that happened. But yeah, Western Legends still remains like this very popular product. And I'm super proud of it. I'm super proud. And we went on and we were a very aggressive company. We launched more Kickstarters than any company ever. In the first year, we started a couple. We did Maple Games, a Canadian-based game that had Daryl Andrews
Yep.
as the studio head. And we worked with some like Grail games and also we kind of like worked with Matago. So like we had this kind of interesting, fluid dynamic between these studios. And I was there for about 3 years, and then the company just kind of got to a place where like I was considering doing something else, and so I wanted to do consulting work. And at the time I was dating a woman who also worked in the industry, and we had this idea for doing like uh like a event based uh networking B2B type thing. And I left my job in December of 2019. I was offered the most money I was ever offered in my life to work for a large publisher, and I said no
Hmm.
to bet on myself. And then COVID happened, and the event-based idea was no longer. So then for a year, I was a freelance developer and designer, and it was tough. It was a tough year for me. And then
Yeah.
after that, I worked at CMON.
So did you sell Colossal then, or did you just left?
I left Colossal. I sold my shares in the
Yeah.
company to the other partners. So but yeah, I mean, I'm proud of Colossal. The guy I hired, my first employee, AJ, runs the studio now. Remarkably cool guy. My former business partner, Arnaud, still love him to death. And yeah, I mean, they put out some games of mine. Like I just did an expansion for Runation. I think they're like reprinting this game of mine called All Manner of Evil. That's like this weird Lovecraftian kind of simultaneous action reveal game.
Yep.
So yeah, I worked there, and then I went to CMON to be a senior designer. And my first task was kind of like look at all these old games that had their contracts had lapsed, and we wanted to do new versions of them. So I worked on the Adventurers games, one of which was a Fantasy Flight game, one of which was an AEG game, and completely redesigned those, but in the spirit of what the original designers had done. And then made a third game. I worked on a bunch of, did dev on a bunch of Marvel Zombie stuff. The final or the Song of Ice and Fire miniatures game, I was a tester and dev on. I did on Tactics, the Song of Ice and Fire tactics game, which is an incredibly cool game. I was the dev on that, and it was really funny. I just got put on there as a dev, and then the main dev couldn't do it. So then and I had like no experience with miniatures games.
Mm,
That was the thing that was good because I was not looking at it the way that everyone else was. I was looking at it more like a board game instead of a miniatures game, and then that kind of drove us to some really right solutions. And I was at CMON for, if you count the contract work I did for CMON Asia, I was there for 4.5 years. Yeah.
wow. And why did you leave Simon?
Well, I was ready to, I kind of felt a little bit like, man, how do I talk about this? I love everyone that worked there. Everyone that worked there was amazing. I think what happened was there was a lot of licensed games, and so I was kind of brought in to be this like semi-awakened realmsy kind of designer that made these big games. And I just kept in, I ended up doing a lot of development work and like working on IP games, and I never actually got to do kind of what I wanted to do.
Mm,
So I was just kind of itching to get back into designing original properties. Like I did all the world building on like the on Aeon's End, and I worked on the first two Aeon's End games. I did art direction on, I don't know, like five of them. And like I missed that stuff. I didn't want to just make, intellectual property version of Zombicide or intellectual property version of a game that we had already done. It wasn't really what I wanted my career to be, even though that probably was a smarter thing. So then I left, and of course, CMON has obviously changed quite a bit since
oh yeah.
then. And I went back to indie boards and cards. So 8 years later, I'm back, kind of back where I started. But I work with two of my very best friends, one of which Nick, who's been at indie boards and cards the whole time, and then the developer Chris Ham, who went with me from. He started at Colossal. He went to CMON with me, and then he went to. He's now working at indie boards and cards with me. So I get to work with my two very best friends in the industry. And I mean, it's amazing. Like they're both like it's the coolest thing in the world that I get to work with both of them.
And then coming back to indie boards and cards, was it? And it's more just kind of from a designer standpoint. Is that kind of the key role now, or?
My title is creative director, but I mean, effectively, I am like big gaudy game designer guy.
Mm,
I mean, so indie boards and cards we're one of those companies that I don't think we like pop onto people's radar as being like a big player, but we have Coup, we have Resistance, we have Terraforming Mars, Aeon's End every year. It's getting ready to launch its 10th core product, with I don't know, 40 SKUs total for all the products. It's a multi-million dollar franchise. And that doesn't even count things like Flashpoint and all the other licensed games that we had that were great through Stronghold. So we have like really strong titles, but no one on the team makes these kind of adventure style games. So I
mm,
do a lot of like the content writing and the world building. So I have worked as like an art director, but I also do a lot of like the guerrilla marketing. They send me out to like work with the influencers and go and like demo the games to people like Vassal or whoever,
yeah.
BG or whatever. So yeah, I'm a bit of an odd duck. I basically do everything except for logistics type. I'm not really managerial in any capacity anymore. After Colossal, that was it.
Yeah.
But I do a lot of more of the creative side of the process, front of process, if you will.
So where did Journeys Afar come from? Like when did the seed of that game kind of start?
Um, well, I always kind of, 90% of my job starts with these two words, what if?
Yeah.
And I had worked on Western Legends. I did a game called Forsaken that was this big. I worked with Game Trays Lab to start our Game Trays to start their own publishing house, and we did this game called Forsaken. And unfortunately, Forsaken has been and had a lot of challenges. It encountered some legal challenges that has delayed the project, and
Trademark
unfortunately.
issues, wasn't that the big one on that one? Or?
Yeah, they're finally Noah, who is a wonderful, wonderful guy, and
Yep.
I know people are frustrated, but Noah is one of the kindest, most generous people I've met in my life, genuinely. And he took a huge chance on me to do this. I was the one who encouraged him to start Game Trays Lab and to make this game. And it's just been stuck in limbo. And now that the tariffs, $130 game with tariffs, and you know about publishing, it's not it's expensive. That's a big unexpected bill
Yeah.
uh, on top of legal fees and things like that. So I gosh, you just asked me a question. I totally lost my train of thought talking about.
Well, starting with the Journeys Afar and kind of the seed of that idea. Yeah.
Forsaken, Journeys Afar has a lot of the DNA that Forsaken had. It's got like multiple boards. It is very story driven, while it all has this kind of underlying engine building element to it. At a first glance, it feels like it should be a cooperative game, but it's not. And so I took kind of all the lessons from working on Western Legends, which is, very like PvP, experiential. It has story, but it's more the players fill in the blanks. Forsaken, which is heavy story, heavy mechanisms, and I wanted to kind of make like a game that kind of incorporated all the lessons into a single build. And I don't know, I like my daughter's 11 right now, and she's just like such a cool person. And she, not to wax sentimental, but I've probably watched Adventure Time with her 10 times, and I thought I liked Studio Ghibli, and she like has gone way further down that road than I have. And we've just rewatched those movies, and I just kind of started paying closer attention to the things that she was interested in, and I wanted to make a game that was kind of that she would love, that was about the things that she loved,
Hmm.
the things that we kind of shared a love for. So it has this like vaguely Japanese theme, but it's really kind of Studio Ghibli's like a Japanese take on Western, stories, fairy tale, folklore, culture at times. So this is almost like a Western take on a Japanese take on a Western take thematically. But I wanted to mechanically push the game somewhere really different. So everyone is their own character in their own world. So you literally start with a game in front of you, like an entire game. And then all of the worlds inform all of the content in the game. So all the encounters, the stuff you buy, the threats you face, the quests you can take. It's all part of that world, and each world has its own unique mechanisms, its own hook. It has its own, I mean, down to even like tone and like distribution of mechanisms and stuff throughout the game. There's a lot of like depth there and nuance. But the main thing for me, having written all of the content for this game, was I really realized like how many games I worked on where just kind of like violence and like conflict was like the problem and the solution.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to work on a game that was kind of like cozier, where like it told different stories that just weren't kind of, not to sound corny, just kind of like male aggression allegories.
Yeah.
uh, and so, like one of the characters is like trying to figure out how she was created. She's like made of glass, and she's kind of like this Pinocchio. And then she has a secret admirer, and she's trying to figure out who likes her. Or like you could be a turtle that fell asleep for 1,000 years, and all this stuff has happened in lieu of him taking an unexpectedly long break from work. There's a lot of like whimsy, and it's very lighthearted and cute. And this last year of my life, on a like on a personal level, was a pretty challenging, lots of changes. So this was like a place that really, this game was like a place for me to like really focus on solutions and positivity. And it really like changed my opinion on how I make games and how I
Mm.
look at games. And yeah, I mean, honestly, for me, like, I think it's my best game. I really do think it's my best work. It's my most personal work for sure.
Over 800 cards.
Unique cards. There's 805 cards, and there's only one card that has a duplicate.
Which is insane. Like I'm just trying to think.
And they're not iterative either. It's not like one is A, B, one is B, C, one is C, D. They're like wildly divergent.
So how do you do? Like I'm just thinking of the time I've put in to creating some of the games I've created, which are not even close to being as robust as this. Like how much time does this take to do
Year
that
and a
much
half.
content?
The hardest part is the writing. I mean, the game has almost 100 and like about 150, 170 pages of original narrative, and then each world has its own tone. There is this Japanese element to it, so I had to do a lot of research. We have a cultural sensitivity expert that is making sure that we're,
Yeah.
I'm not Japanese, while I might admire that culture. Our fearless leader, also named Travis, lived in Japan. He has a deep, abiding love of Japanese culture from his time living there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of just like beyond even just the play testing, like the steeped in mysticism and like trying to make each world feel like it's its own thing that could stand alone if it were, and not just kind of like a sketch of an idea. I think
Yeah.
a lot of people would have approached it like, here's this kind of one light that's on instead of all the lights are on in each world, and that little, the contrast of that is supposed to be the thing that's different. I mean, the amount of work that went into this is tremendous, and like I didn't really have a developer or anything throughout the majority of the process. Chris Ham came on here at the end, and then Nick did a lot of guidance. I had a guy named Abe that helped me through a part of the game, but a lot of it was just me alone working, and uh, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've worked on enough of these games that like I absolutely have like a bag of tricks that I pull from, and
Sure.
like I said, I've used lessons learned. Um, but this game has so many variables, like it's very objective based. So how do you how do you calculate balance when you are when where the gate where you can leave the world positionally where it is, what worlds are next to you, where their gates are, where you're at in the game state, what the game has given you, because the game is all about abundance and not scarcity. So there, we cracked the code on it. It took us some time to figure
Yeah.
out like the math on like how to make it balanced. But it is, to not to be cheesy, it is more about the journey than the destination in the game. I think like the
Sure.
game tells you a story and it takes you somewhere different each time. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I really like enjoyed making the game, like, and so like I would come up with a funny idea, like what if you got a bad haircut, like, and then what would a card do if that represented you had a bad haircut, or or you get sprayed with a fragrant cologne and then all of the NPCs travel to your world because they can smell how good you smell. So there's all these kind of like little cute thematic nods, and then there's obviously just kind of nuts and bolts stuff there to make the game work too.
So just so I'm clear, so each player has their own world that they're in. Is that how that works?
One world with their own character that has three
Wow.
different stories that are multi-stage quests. That was the hardest thing, is the journeys. And I'm sure the backers are like, "What? There's only three of these things?" And it's like, dude, like
Yeah.
that's like 100 pages of writing just for those. The balance on those things is wild because they're complex, and they're one of the timers in the game too. But yeah, you have your own world with its own geography. You have like a lot of the same like four fundamental basic spaces. You have a special location, and then there's like a hook. Like in one world, there's gods, and you can go and you can make an offering to the gods. There's in another world, it changes the core economy of the game, and you can buy these special powerful cards. In another world, there's literally gambling where you drop your player markers into a dice tower, and where they land, that's what you get, and you can score points that way. There's coin flipping. You can bet on everything in that world. Like anytime someone does something, you can bet if they're going to succeed or not. So it was really fun. And I look at the things in the game and I realize like one world has an ocean, and then I realize the ocean is just the wasteland in my game Ruination. And I didn't realize that at the time. My boss was like, you should make a world that's like islands. So it's like geographically feels different. And then my solution was I just used something that I already knew worked, but I did it subconsciously. Um, so there's a lot of stuff. I get called Trackvis a lot at work because I love tracks. So, or they call me Count Tracula. I put a lot of tracks in games. This game has surprisingly the least amount of tracks that I've ever put in a game. Um, but it's also like I think I was really hard on this new design conceit, which is just kind of like play positive loop,
Yeah.
where it just like you just get stuff and it feels good and you're kind of rewarded. And I kind of thumb my nose at that. And this game is so that like it's just your first turn, you're like, I got given a free item. I did like 4 things that were cool on my turn. I increased one of my skills and I scored a point. And every turn is like that until the game ends. So, yeah, I don't know. Eric Lang used to call me what was his nickname for me in the early part of my career? Oh, the High Prince of Agonizing Decisions. That's what he called it. So I have moved away from that era of my career. And like now I just want to make stuff that is fun and memorable. And I definitely like the use of storytelling as a medium in games.
Yeah. What comes next? Like, do you have another title you're already working? I imagine you've got another title you're already working.
Always. Yeah, I can't
Can you talk about it? No.
Well, I can give you a I'm working on a popular IP that will be brought over into a dungeon crawler type game where like um you've never seen anything like it. And I say this and then people go, oh, yeah, yeah. And then I promise there's like 2 or 3 things in this game that you've never seen before. And like one of the best things about it is it handles all of the obnoxious admin of those kinds of games in this like insanely effective way that is very fast and also like scary.
Mm-hmm.
But the coolest thing in the game is like it's a cooperative game. The player turn order is however you want it to be. You just go until like you hit this certain criteria and then the bad guys go. But literally I could be like, I'm going to pick you up and throw you, and then you're going to run in that room, you're going to search, you're going to shut a door, then you're going to use this other power, then I'm going to come in, and then like the amount of like agency is like I've never seen anything like it. Um, and yeah, I've been working on this game since 2018. I actually
Wow.
it was a game that I was working on when I was at CMON, and we were able to get the design here at Indie Boards and Cards and continue the work on it. So I'm super stoked for it. We are literally just started pounding the pavement on this one a couple weeks ago.
Oh, that's amazing. For those who want to check out Journeys Afar, I am going to put a link in the show notes. There is 4 days left on this campaign. If people want to I encourage them to check it out. It looks gorgeous, and it looks like just the worlds you've built here. This whole narrative universe, I think, is just a testament to the amount of passion you put into this at this stage in your career. And I think a lot of people are going to be pretty impressed with what you guys have got here. Man, the time goes by so fast, but I want to wish you all the best, Travis, on this campaign. I can't wait to see this next title that you're talking about. Hopefully you send me a sneak peek when you guys are ready to start talking about it. Love to see it, and maybe we'll get you back on the podcast to talk about that one as well, my friend.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, buddy. You take care. Cheers. This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.